and water. There is no supplementary agenda this evening, Mr. Mayor. And for attendance, we have Councillor Doyle on the Zoom call this evening. We have regrets from Councillor Anderson, Councillor Harrigan, and Councillor McDonald, and Councillor Carmen McGregor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we get started, I just want to make a few opening comments. We would all prefer not to be here tonight. What's happening south of the border is impacting all of us, and it's terrible what's going on. And every mayor, every municipality, every politician in this country are dealing with this right now. I want to recognize that that MPP Steve Pinsonow's here just to listen in, and also our MP Dave Epp and MPP Trevor Jones is on the line as well, listening to what we have to say here. So with that, the key here, tonight we're going to be going through a number of things that administration is working on. I want to make sure that all of council is up to speed as to what everything the administration has been working on the last month or 2 months. Ever since tariffs were started to talk about, they've been doing a lot of work that way. So we got ultimately a motion that we're going to pass or at least work on. It's a draft one. It's put together and it's really directive of, so we as council are directing administration of all the things they're working on regarding tariffs. So that's what all tonight's about, is the tariffs. The key here, though, is we work together, not just as council, not just as Chatham-Kent, not just as Ontario, not just as Canada. This is a thing that we need to work right across the nation, but as well, a lot of our allies. We're going to be tying a lot of them in. The key here is we need to put pressure on the average American citizen, and that's what we're talking about here. That's what all the discussions have been, is to make it uncomfortable so that they're calling their representatives and saying tariffs aren't the right thing. So as we proceed on, that's what we'll be looking for. But so with that, we're going to do a presentation by administration, and then I'll ask for questions regarding any of that. Then we'll get into the motion, which is in front of you. It'll be up on the screen, but each of you has a copy of the back of your presentation. So we'll go through that, and then we'll have 5 minutes each to talk about in that manner as well. As well, in your comments, we can probably save some time because we all agree tariffs are varying degrees of nasty. So I don't think we all have to do it because each and every one of us is going to say it. So I think we can agree that we need to talk about that just to save some time. But with that, I'll pass it over to Bruce to get things started. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. As the Mayor mentioned, we're going to go through a fairly short presentation. Gord Quinton, our Chief Financial Officer, and Stuart McFadden, our Director of Economic Development and Tourism Services, are going to walk you through this presentation. It's going to provide a bit of background for everybody. And as the Mayor mentioned, the various things that we've been working on since, there's an inkling of the word tariffs back, a couple months ago, even from the time of the election, right? So, and then ultimately, as the Mayor mentioned, we'll be introducing a draft resolution for Council's review and consideration as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gord for the first part of the presentation. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Council. Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer. You can tell that an accountant wrote the title here. Canada great, free trade's good, and tariffs are bad. It's time to be bold, but be careful what we do here tonight as well. So first, I want to say we're all proud Canadians, and this isn't anything that we say tonight isn't anti-American. It's anti the Trump tariffs. That's the issue. We have it. We have free trade agreements. We expect people to hold up their end of the bargain. So I'm just going to go through a quick background of what is a tariff? Well, it's a tax on another country's goods coming into your country. So the Trump tariffs are on Canadian goods coming into America. They were implemented March 4th, 10% tariff on all energy entering USA, and 25% tariff on all other goods entering USA. Prime Minister Trudeau immediately implemented retaliatory tariffs on March 4th as well, starting off on $30 billion worth of goods, a 25% tariff on things like orange juice, peanut butter, wine, spirits, beer, coffee, appliances, apparel, footwear, motorcycles, cosmetics, and certain pulp and paper products. And then in a few weeks' time, further $125 billion tariffs on electrical vehicles, fruits and vegetables, beef, pork, dairy, electronics, steel, aluminum, trucks, and buses. So we're going to get into things tonight. What do our citizens buy? Well, vegetables and a lot of products come up from the south. But what do we buy here as well as Chatham-Kent, and particularly when we get into our fleet vehicles, it becomes an issue. All Canadian importers, from regular people to small businesses and consumers to giant companies, will now pay that extra tax when they bring American products north to Canada. What we have is the Canada-U.S. Mexican free trade agreement that was signed by Canada, U.S., and Mexico in 2018. And just to remind you who was president in 2018, well, it was Mr. Donald Trump who signed this agreement, and it was the best agreement ever, I think is some of his quotes. It makes the flow of goods easier throughout North America, resulting lower cost of goods for all residents. There is a dispute mechanism in place, but it is a long legal process. However, there is also exemption mechanisms, and that's, to be clear, that's what the president has used. There's exemption for national security. So that is why you hear of the fentanyl crisis as the reason that this has been brought forward as a national security item. There's lots of facts out there about what percentage of fentanyl actually flows through Canada and through the US, and not to say that we can't do a better job at our borders. And the Prime Minister has already taken steps to that process. Trade deals are never perfect. There's winners and losers on everything. All countries often make concessions to get the best deal for their country. Canada also, of course, has free trade deals with many countries around the world. Now I'm going to have Dave Taylor just talk about our purchasing bylaw and trade agreements.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak on this. For those who don't know, I'm Dave Taylor, Director of Legal Services. So there's a number of legal components that obviously will come into this. Gord's already touched on some of them in terms of just the free trade agreement themselves. Where it boils down, though, to operations at the municipal level, it really comes a lot into how we purchase things under our purchasing bylaw and our purchasing process. Our bylaw indicates a number of goals that the purchasing processes are intended to accomplish. One of those is delivering and obtaining services and goods efficiently, openly, and for a best value consideration. And that's a really important piece because, of course, municipalities are stewards of taxpayer dollars. And so we need to be factoring in best value when we do any sort of purchase. This is an issue that municipalities across Ontario are struggling with, and many are having meetings, today or this week about how to respond to this. And there's a couple of different approaches that are being taken. But on that issue of best value, I am starting to see consistency that the fact that tariffs are being applied, the fact that we have this uncertainty in relation to tariffs is a reasonable thing for a municipality to start considering in relation to its purchases, right? So we might be procuring a service or a good from America directly, or it might be somewhere in one of our local companies' supply chain that they're providing. And now there's this uncertainty in relation to, will it be the price that we thought it was going to be? Or is it that price plus 25%? Or is it that price plus some question mark percent in the future, depending on what decision is made? And so there is some room, certainly for municipalities to be considering tariffs in the way in which they do purchases. But we also have some guardrails and restrictions on how municipalities do purchases. these include provincial legislation. There is some provincial legislation that deals with kind of restrictions on how we do purchases. There's also the trade agreements that Gord mentioned. Certainly we have one with the United States now, but there's also other ones. We have court decisions that have interpreted pieces of legislations, and we also have municipal contract documents. I wanted to bring the issue of municipal contracts forward because, as I've put in bold there on this slide, there's a different consideration for existing contracts and future contracts, right? We might actually have entered into existing contracts, even with local suppliers, that Chatham-Kent may well be bound by. There's a different category that we could be looking at in terms of what are we going to do for future contracts. And that's the type of thing that administration is absolutely working away at, because you have to take each of these contractual relationships that we have and look at the individual terms of them. And so blanket approaches about what we're going to do are difficult when we have kind of a very varied organization that may actually only be able to procure goods from certain locations. They may have certain products that have a connected component to it that can only come from certain locations, and we may well already have existing contractual relationships. So there's a lot of work to do in kind of assessing how is the municipality going to respond to these issues. Also wanted to point out that the province may be able to provide some direction and assistance on some of the existing legal restrictions we have. Certainly Premier Ford has already indicated steps that his government intends to take in relation to provincial procurements, purchases, and considering excluding American companies from those bids. We may well end up getting direction to municipalities, it's been mentioned, that may assist in other areas that we may be restricted on right now, or there's opportunities for advocacy about that if Chatham-Kent runs into any sort of barriers in what we're trying to do to respond to this issue. As Gord already mentioned, I also wanted to remind Council that we have free trade agreements with other municipalities, or sorry, with other nations, with other countries. So we have free trade with the European Union. There's trade agreements that actually go between provinces as well. And so that's important to consider, because when we're tailoring a response to this, we're upset about the Trump tariffs, right? We're not upset about our relationship and our negotiated relationship with the European Union, right? That's a free trade agreement that we still are getting the benefits from. And so again, it's about tailoring the approach. It's about being surgical in our approach to how we're going to respond to these issues, and not having those consequences that maybe, you know, if we went to a buy local type campaign, well, that's actually hurting maybe our European Union colleagues that or friends that we're still very happy with, that haven't done anything kind of negative in this area. Also, just wanted to point out that, as I mentioned already, that we're already engaged considerably with other municipalities, having discussions about how they're dealing with this. Everybody's trying to figure out these difficult, complex issues on a really tight timeline. So we're very much engaged with those municipalities, looking at what those municipalities are doing in terms of methods of responding to this through these kind of legal restrictions, particularly in the purchasing area. Turn it back over to Gord.
So what do we purchase? Try to put some dollars into this. In 2024, we made 55 direct purchases to USA companies totaling 1.7 million in Canadian dollar equivalent. I do want to note that because fire trucks is one of our major purchases, there wasn't a fire truck delivered to us in 2024. So on average, that might be higher. And in fact, we have approximately $6 million of upcoming fire trucks and other major truck components, let's say, that will be sourced from USA and in receipt over 25 and 26. And to be clear, like often it might be a chassis built somewhere and then come over here for a snowplow blade or put on. Like stuff goes across. Parts go across the border many times, and if you get into the auto world, a truck could have components from 25 different countries in it, but where was it assembled and in what ways? So it can get very complicated, and things that we're working through. That 1.7 million purchase. So it's what did we purchase? Well, specialized equipment, goods and software that aren't available from any Canadian sources. There's also the advocacy part. So we belong to things like the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities initiatives, which I believe Councillor Anderson's attending something right now. That's in American monies to an American place and American Waterworks Associations and those types of groups. So not all that purchase is goods. There's a lot of it that's the specialized things that just aren't available in our Canadian market. We also, of course, purchase millions and millions of dollars of goods and services through Canadian companies that source goods from the USA. When you think of software, Microsoft Office, as an example, it's a international company, but we buy from a Canadian distributor of that product. So things can get tricky, as I guess the main point. And we'll see what the impacts of the tariffs are as they get rolled out. What type of goods and services do have a tariff, and what are exempted. Now, just to kind of have Stuart talk about what Economic Development Services is doing.
Thank you, Gord. Mayor Caniff, councillors. Wish I wasn't here to talk about these things, but it's here and we'll deal with it, right? So I'll tell you, everything that we have is as of 5 o'clock. At 6:03 it could change. At 7:05 it could change. Tomorrow morning it could change. We announced today that UMSCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, that they were going to delay that until April 2nd. But I think there's some fine print inside of there. We need to figure out that actually it's only, UMSCA only covers about 36% of imports from Canada into the United States and about 50% from Mexico. So news at 11 on how this is going to fall out. And that's one of the real challenges we have, is the unknown. I mean, I hate to say this, but I wish it was just, this is what it is and work through the problem. Because if you have a problem, you know more about it, well, then you can fix it. This right here, it changes, and it's got a lot of unease in the markets right now. Trillions of dollars being lost in the markets because of all of this unknown and whatnot. So as Bruce said earlier on, we have been meeting with various organizations, sector-specific, province feds, since before this came in place, when it was first a conversation. There was a lot of work advocating on behalf of Canadians on the federal side, the Team Canada approach. And industry leaders to try and bring some common sense and whatnot. Unfortunately, here we are again today. And again, the goalposts continue to move, which makes it more difficult for us. So what can we do here? I think what we need to do first and foremost is don't overreact, because I don't know when it's going to change, or if it's going to change, or what's going to be involved. We learned from COVID that having a place where we could centralize information was a good thing for us to do. So we have created a tariff page on our website, which will be updated when new information comes out. It's new. The federal government has said that there will be programs for people that are displaced and for businesses impacted by the tariffs, but we have no details on what that looks like yet. Once that information is out and once those programs are established, we'll be making sure that that is posted on our website, that we are making sure that information is out of the hands of the people that need it. And again, Premier Ford the other day, when his comments were saying that now is the time to invest in infrastructure and build and new roads and bridges, and that's been going on since a couple world wars and a recession and a depression, where the wrong thing to do in times like this, when the economy gets a little bit shaken by something like this, is to pull back. We need to invest and to continue to stimulate the economy, to keep people working, and I would suggest that the province has in the past put programs together for people to new markets or new equipment, new technology, retraining. These are things that I would imagine are going to come down the pipe. And when all of that information is known, then we'll make sure that we're working with all of our groups to make sure they take advantage of all of that. We're going to continue to work. We're getting back to work on the province side. The Elections Act, I think it's March 17th, is an important date where we can get back to work inside of Queen's Park. The federal government, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball on that. But we're going to continue to work with whoever we can to get as much information as we can and advocate on behalf of the businesses in CK, the people, the employees in CK, to make sure that they're bringing their concerns to the table on their behalf. So again, buy local when we can, when it makes sense. You're supporting your next door neighbor, you're supporting your friends, you're supporting, you're supporting the person that sponsors your child's hockey team. So when it makes sense, please buy local. Again, we want to be careful about unintended consequences out there. And that's, the other thing we're going to do is on social media, we're going to be starting a campaign on locally owned and operated and manufactured products. We have just launched today a staycation site on our tourism website for people who might be discouraged in going down to the United States and might want to do something here locally. We've got that going today. And I want to say another thing is the Preparing Shop Local campaign. Rory Ring is here. He's the president and CEO of the Chatham-Kent Chamber of Commerce. Rory and I have got to know each other pretty good last little while, some late night calls but Rory and I are going to continue to collaborate. He gets a lot of information from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and we've been exchanging information back and forth. Rory and I are committed to working with the other chambers throughout Chatham-Kent to see what we can do to again, through collaboration, do whatever we can do to help support the businesses here. So I want to say thank you, Rory, and we'll, again, we are going to, we'll see how this goes. It's just getting started, but let's hope that common sense comes in and that it's over, but we got to be prepared, and we will be. So thank you very much, Gordon.
Thank you. Jody wasn't able to make it tonight, but I just wanted to mention about employment and social services support. So Employment and Social Services staff will be ready to implement any program directed by the provincial government in response to this Trump trade war. And we'll be ready to provide financial, employment, and human services supports to residents. And just mental health is, of course, is going to be we're already in a mental health crisis in Chatham-Kent and much of Canada. Losing jobs is something that, of course, puts people into mental stress as well. So just touting all the available assistance from all our local agencies. So we do need a Team Canada approach. It's a great start from the federal and provincial governments. They're acting appropriately. They're very quickly implementing the retaliatory tariffs and making it, whether it's pulling Kentucky bourbon off the liquor stores or whatever. There's been a great amount of positive reactions from the upper levels of governments, and we should be advocating that we should advocate in agreement with those upper levels. Make sure that we stay a focused message and don't get into distractions. Canadian municipalities can also leverage their American counterparts through advocacy. So whenever we can, like there are Michigan councils getting together tonight too on how the shutdown of the auto industry was going to impact their communities this week as well, as goods go back and forth, and their plants might have to shut down. It would take years for any permanent decisions to be made by any automaker. So our American counterparts at municipalities are hurting as well, and I just want to point that out. They could be a key asset in the lobby against the Trump tariffs. The more and more Americans speaking out against this attack on Canada, and bringing that up to their state governments and through their Congress men and women, that's how this will eventually end, is the pressure from inside America to change this. And we encourage council to be cautious and measured in their response to this unfair Trump war, and we mentioned that a few times tonight. And then the community approach, Stuart got into this a little bit, but support local businesses, buy Canadian, and ask our citizens to support all levels of governments in this particular issue of the fight against the unfair Trump tariffs. So tonight we put together a draft resolution. It's lengthy. It goes on to 3 slides. This is what we'll be handing over to council in a second to consider. It be in your hands to do what you'd like with it, but this is our draft, so I am going to read it. Whereas Canada is facing unfair trade war based on tariffs from the Trump administration, and whereas tariffs have the prospect of negatively impacting our citizens, businesses, and community organizations, and whereas Chatham-Kent Council is ready and prepared to stand up for our businesses and citizens and to support Team Canada in this fight, and whereas the approach taken to respond to tariffs needs to consider all potential impacts of the decision, including unintended consequences. Therefore, Chatham-Kent Municipal Council directs administration to continue its work to address the impacts of this trade war, to immediately work on the following list of actions, and to work on any other matters that could be relevant to address the impact of these unfair tariffs. And we have 6 items here continuing. Item number 1, administration continue, and I do want to emphasize the continue part. We've been on this for the last month as this has been ramping up. Administration continued to work on addressing tariff impacts, including the review of approaches taken by other municipalities to ensure Chatham-Kent is adopting best practices, looking at our supply chains for major purchases and products that may be impacted by tariffs, legal options for adjusting contracts and procurement processes to reduce Chatham-Kent's exposure to tariffs, employment and social services for citizens whose jobs may be impacted by tariffs, and opportunities to advance major projects to assist in economic stimulus. That could be a big one as this unfolds over the next 6 months. Number 2, economic development continue to connect with local businesses to understand impacts that tariffs are having and enhance existing buy local campaigns to help support local businesses and provide citizens with information about their purchasing decisions. Be prepared to assist businesses when accessing the senior government programs that may become available. Number 3, administration be directed to support upper level government's Team Canada approach, including participating in municipal association work and preparing advocacy to senior levels of government to address any barriers Chatham-Kent faces and advance the needs of our local companies. And all of administration and many of councillors are on different committees, whether it's whether it's WOWC or AMO or Roma or the Big Mayors group and the Treasurers group and the Lawyers group. And we didn't list them. Everybody has this on their mind as it impacts their work. Number 4, administration continue to update the webpage that we've set up to keep citizens updated on the impacts of tariffs and relief programs that become available from the upper levels. And administration report back to the Mayor and Council regarding any opportunities for political collaboration between Chatham-Kent and other municipalities, municipal associations, and cross-border initiatives. And finally, administration return to Council for any necessary funding requests and with updates on progress on each of the items in this motion. On purpose, we did print this out tonight because this is long. It's on your desk, so you don't have to read it on the screen. And I now turn it over to the Mayor for discussions.
Yes, so we're going to pass over with the process is we're going to ask everybody that has questions of the presentation, then we'll end the questions, then we'll go into the discussion of the motion. Knowing that we've worked pretty hard to capture, we've talked to a lot of other communities and saying, what are you doing? Like through the Border Mayor Alliance, we're dealing with 50 plus mayors that are there and asking what they're doing. So we're trying to capture everything we can do. Now, I made an agreement, we had a meeting just before this. I will be sending this is the first of its kind. No other than none of the mayors have done this at council. So we're gonna be forwarding this on to them, and I'm gonna be asking for all their feedback. So we will see if there's stuff that we've missed, but I believe we've captured a lot of what we can do. We're fairly limited. We don't have the resources that the federal and provincial government does as far as coming and helping businesses and individuals that are impacted by it as far as financially. So just keep that in mind, as well as with our questions. I'd like to try and avoid delving into the exact detail, knowing that administration will be looking for all these opportunities. So we want just, again, through this, to capture any questions. So with that, I will go to questions of the, so I'll start with Councillor McGrail.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Caniff. I just needed a quick understanding for myself of the Canada-U.S. Mexico agreement. So it was established in 2018. Is there an end date, or is there like a revisit date, or is that not until they come together and create a new agreement? How does that work?
Dave, I'm not sure if you know, but I have in my mind that it was around a 10-year period that there would be a review. But
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, there's actually an upcoming renegotiation that has to occur on that, and so there's been some commentary that this is actually Trump preparing for that upcoming renegotiation.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering where that was going. Thank you.
Councillor Doyle, followed by Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just, I guess, have a question, and it's kind of not on the tariffs so much, but if we're looking here to do something to kind of help our constituents out with the rising cost of stuff, and Canadians as well, how come nothing has been brought up about the carbon tax and the carbon tax increase that's about to happen? Like, because in my opinion, if we want to do things to help our constituents out and Canadians out, then we should be adding to that motion and adding something that we send a letter to our federal government and all the other municipalities saying that, especially at the time that we're in right now, it is not the time to increase our carbon tax another 15 to 20% in April. That's just going to hurt people even more. So I think that's something I'd like to know if we could discuss or add into this, because I think even though they're different topics, they're along the same lines of extra tax and hurting our constituents. So just want to see what your thoughts are on there.
yeah, I don't want to delve into that as administration. That's a political comment. I only want to say that the federal and provincial governments are working on a plan to address this. They're in some with the liberal leadership being finalized at the federal level. There's what the prime minister can say today, and then what the next prime minister can say once they're in charge. I just don't know where that's going to go. And at the provincial level, we just had the election, but they're not able to actually form government till March 17th. So, but not to say that this is your motion. That it's up to council to decide what's in the motion.
So I just want to add to that, going back to the earlier question, Dave Epp has just texted me a couple of things. The answer to that is that the 2026 CUSMA renewal is mandated, so in 2026, and he's typing in a response to this question right now, Councillor Doyle, so I will cut in with it when it's done. It's been up for a while, so he'll give a response as well.
Our federal government's telling them to hold off on increasing the carbon tax, especially at the time that we're in. And I would even go one further and say it's pretty obvious that President Trump and Prime Minister Trudeau don't seem to get along very well. So I think it would also be in the best interest of Canadians for us to send a letter to them to say that we need to have a federal election to get whoever's going to be our new Prime Minister in charge, so we can get some negotiations going. I think that would also help the situation as well.
Okay, Councillor Bondi, followed by Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I have a question, but just a quick fact. I was listening to American radio today, WJR, and they're relatively pro-Trump. Obviously, it's America. But one of the hosts pointed out that in the last year, 42 pounds of fentanyl have been seized crossing the Canadian border into America. And in the same time frame, 22,000 pounds was collected coming from Mexico. So it's an excuse, right? But anyway, I just thought that was an interesting thing. Now my question is, maybe it was Stuart, Gordon, maybe it might have been you, and I know this will change in 20 minutes, but what's the 38% of the goods now exempt from the tariffs, and are those goods that are covered under the USMCA thing, or?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, to you, Councillor Bondi. So what I was able to get at 4:30 when I read an update on CNN is the White House has said that the United States-Mexican Canada agreement is being delayed until April the 2nd. Or items covered underneath of that agreement are delayed until April the 2nd. The issue is the fact that about 36% of the items that Canada imports into the United States are covered underneath that agreement. So that would obviously say that the other items that aren't covered under that agreement would be sitting at the proposed 25% tariff. Now they also made a change today that potash was tariffed at 25%. It's now been lowered to 10% to ease the pain on the American farmers. So again, it's a moving, it changes all the time, and that's the difficult part. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. And yeah, it kind of makes you dizzy trying to keep up to this. And another kind of thing that crossed my mind when the administration exempted vehicles for a month, I don't think that was to do us a favor. I think it was to do Michigan a favor, but just thought I'd throw that out there. But anyway, that's it. Great. Thank you, Mayor Caniff.
Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just wanted to ask a couple questions about the U.S. purchases slide that you guys brought up, Gordon. You guys went in great detail with that, and understanding that a lot of them are, very specialized purchase and buys, that sort of thing. But just to follow up on that, I guess, is there any opportunity to explore replacing any of those purchases that were made by Chatham-Kent with Canadian? And I guess, is that something that we're going to be continuously monitoring and maybe reassessing? Because I know there's kind of a focus right now on, not being so reliant, I guess, on buying goods and services, I guess, from the United States moving forward. So, but is that something that we're going to be continuously monitoring, or is there any action that we could make with any of those purchases right now?
So absolutely, it's going to be continuing monitored as the minute per minute changes happen. And remember, it's the countermeasures that the Canadian government will put on that rules what goods are taxed coming into Canada that we're buying. It's not that the Trump tariffs is what's coming from Canada to the U.S. It'll be the Trudeau government's tariffs that will be on the goods that are coming this way. So what those are like, we've gotten some early indications about what's in place now and what's in place in approximately 3 weeks from now. But they're also talking about, well, then what happens a month from now? And that list hasn't been released yet. So software, for example, is something that there's a lot of specialized software that the municipality purchases. I'll just give you one example. The library book system's an American system. We have no indication that that price is going to change for us. It was put out in a competitive bid process. An American company won. I don't know the fine details of any of these, but whether there was a Canadian vendor or not, that would be suitable, or was this product so much above and beyond the Canadian product that in the RFP it, scored 30 points higher, right? And so that's exactly what administration will be looking at and reviewing. And if there is a tariff on imports, it now perhaps became up to 25% more expensive. So on as we move forward in the bidding process on a tender, that American product might have just became more expensive and priced itself out of the market as well. So let that play it. My suggestion is to let that play out, and that's exactly what we're all monitoring right now. What are the changes? And of course, it changes every minute.
I just want to add to that. Point 1C is going to be monitoring. We would expect them to come back, administration to come back with any opportunities that if they see a U.S. purchase that we could get out of, or more importantly, as we move forward, how do we divert and move that? Because there could be costs to getting out of current contracts, but as we move forward, that's exactly what the mission is in that 1C, is to make sure that we try and source as much as we can from a Canadian perspective legally.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that, Gord. Thanks for pointing that out to Mayor Caniff. I didn't catch that when it was first read. So yeah, I think that's a good move. Yeah, great we need to have some contingency, so I'm glad to hear it's being monitored. Thank you.
Councillor Scotchy, followed by Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. My first question was actually specifically in regards to 1C, so you kind of answered that. My second question would be to you, Mr. Quinton. I know that a lot of the motion is, generic, because it's impossible for you to go into, extreme details when we're talking about, programs and all that, because this is very new. I was just curious, though, if something that would be considered, if there is, any type of organizations or industries that might be severely impacted by tariffs. We know that our abilities to do things is extremely limited. As you said, we don't have the resources of, the feds or the province, but could we even anticipate like a tax deferral in regards to not obviously waiving tax, but maybe making the plan a little bit more sufficient for industries that are significantly impacted in regards to less impact from, an interest standpoint or anything like that, if they are longer term, or if they are defaulting for a little bit longer, if we can kind of prove, or they can prove it's significantly related to the tariff impacts?
Thank you very much for the question. That is exactly what upper levels of government are for in a time like this, in a trade war. For how does the federal government react to this? And we know that they are getting programs ready in the works, whether it's stimulus programs, whether it's help additions to unemployment insurance. There's a lot going on in the background that will be able to be rolled out. When you talk about our agricultural sector in Chatham-Kent, all of a sudden, I'll use sugar beets as an example, just because it's a large product in Chatham-Kent. What if that can't go across the border, or is it subject to a 25% tariff? What does that mean for planning in 2 months? There's just so much stuff that we don't know, and that it's way too soon to be coming out with a program, particularly our municipal program, because we're not allowed to borrow for operations, remember. Upper levels of governments are. We saw that in COVID. Who added a high amount of debt for programs? It was mainly at the federal government level. And we want to make sure that, let's see what they come up with through these negotiations over the next few months.
Thank you, and I'll leave my other points to the discussion piece. Thank you.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Gord, and Dave and Stuart for all that work you have done for us and get this ready for in such a short period of time. In terms of item 1D, certainly that's come across. That's been on my mind a lot too. We're already facing, a lot of folks in our community are facing economic hardship. This is not something that will help with that. If we have, to go to Councillor Sakatchi's point, there are several. I mean, I can think of several businesses off the top of my head that would be directly affected by this in various sectors. And what happens in Chatham-Kent if we have a large or even a small number of our fellow citizens that are unemployed almost essentially overnight? I'm just thinking about a Navistar example, which left our community, in pretty dire straits, and it took almost 2 decades to recover from that economic shock. And that was essentially one plan. I mean, it employed a large number of people. But are we, and maybe it might be a Jody question, I appreciate she's not here tonight, but are we preparing for possible layoffs or closures of employers in this community?
So I'll go and I'll talk about 2 points with that. So yes, our staff is definitely prepared. Keep in mind that we administer Ontario Works programs funded by the provincial government, the payment, but we do the administration and working with the client. So we're definitely prepared for that. It'll also be at the federal level, the unemployment insurance. I would assume being prepared for an influx of people coming, applying for EI over the next, or employment insurance, I guess it is, over the next while. But as far as our staff, yes, we're ready, and that, you know, I also don't want to underemphasize the mental health and social impacts of it as well. President Trump himself, in his address the other night, if you had the fun of watching that for 2 hours, did mention there's going to be pain. He was talking specifically, I think, to the American farmers, for example, and there is going to be a lot. This is, we thought COVID was an upset to our economies. This could be far worse, depending on where it goes over the next few months. So we don't know where things are headed, but you know, this is all I can assume that this is a strategic negotiation tactic by the Trump administration, and that maybe some sense will be in the Republican ranks will be impacting the president over the next few days.
Thanks, Gord. I'll be mentioning that in my comments as well. But in terms of 1D, have we done any financial assessment or impact on what that might cost us? We have to hire more staff to deal with an influx of people, or, you know, additional health and social services, whether it's provincially administered, but we are doing that. Have we had a chance yet to look at the financial impacts to our own administrative bottom line on that?
So we hope that there's no impact in the short term, but, you know, over the next couple months, I don't expect an impact. We can handle any increases that come. Employment insurance, for example, lasts for a year, or approximately, depending. There's all types of rules, but my point is, some of these impacts take a while to flow through. No factory is making I would hope, not making a permanent closure decision overnight here. This is everybody sort of waiting out to see, checking their phones every 5 minutes to see what the next announcement is. And so in the long run, yeah, who knows what our impacts would be. But as far as to our, for the next few months for Ontario Work staff, no, they can handle anything that's coming in the short term.
Okay, thanks. And then the last question. I know, again, there's only so much you can cover tonight with all the moving targets, but maybe, or this could be perhaps a Stuart question as well, but do we have any specific information about the specific sectors in our community that are affected? I know the Trump administration has mentioned automotive, manufacturing, steel and aluminum, energy and agriculture. Those are all sectors that are quite substantial in Chatham-Kent specifically. As of this moment, they're mentioning steel and aluminum will still go ahead next week. I had a call from several different agribusinesses today who in the last 3 days have had to pay $10,000 per load, and next week they have 8 loads going for livestock, and so they're already looking at, you know, 100,000 more assessment that they've had to pay that they weren't budgeting for just next week. So those are major hits to local businesses. So have we sort of drilled down on that at all with our local sectors, or was it just kind of still too soon to tell?
So the short answer is yes. We are getting to know more all the time, but Stuart's been in contact with some specific local businesses, so I'll let Stuart.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, to you, Councillor Story. I can't imagine a sector in Chatham-Kent that's not going to be impacted, directly or indirectly, right? You know, it goes across all boards. I've talked to a bunch in ag, and we know what kind of, we had a pickle processing facility in Wallaceburg up to a year and a half ago and it went down. Now we have about, I think it's around $16 million worth of Chatham-Kent cucumbers that 100% of them, well, most of them, I shouldn't say 100%, majority of them all go to the States for processing. So we send them our cucumbers and they send us back boxes of Bix. And that's really made us understand about what we need to maybe focus on in the future, and that's becoming a little bit more self-sustainable. And if anybody could have ever thought, I'm sure that the receiver maybe would have went about that sale differently. But it is going to be painful across all sectors. And if this continues to go on without, but again, it's changing. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it and think that it's not going to be impactful. It is. And just to stress what Gord said, people, all of this delays and unknown, the mental health challenges, and people check in on our friends, check in on our family, make sure that they're okay. There are resources available for those who need it, and I would encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I had the same call today as Allison too, and I didn't realize on the tariff that it goes back to the farmer. The tariff, when they ship their hogs and that over to the States, it goes back to the farmer here. So the farmer outside of Ridgetown called me today, and it was a $70,000 hit this week just on his tariffs to ship his product. And they can't do that very long. They said like it's going to be short term. So it's all going back to our farmers here, the tariff. It's not, they're not paying on the other side. We're paying over here for it. Thank you.
Yeah, and perhaps I'll just explain that a little bit further, because tariffs is not an easy thing to understand. Yes, it is American tariffs on imports coming in. It should be the American consumer paying for it. But they had the shipments lined up. There's nowhere else for these, like they're ready to be shipped until you find another market, whether it's overseas or elsewhere in Canada. What choice do you have as the local farmer right now? So that's part of it. Technically, it's a tariff to be paid by the American consumer, but it doesn't land at the pain gets shared both sides of the borders, I guess is the easiest way.
So just a point on that, I mean, that's concerning because the concept is that whoever purchased them on the U.S. side would have to pay the tariff. But I guess in this case, that is a direct impact to say if the American consumer might not be picking those up, and based on contracts. So there's going to be a lot of these issues that are going to come forward like that.
On the other side of it, the farmers won't be shipping their product over there. They'll run out of product over there, then it'll drive their prices up. So they'll pay in the end. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, what I want to do is then put this motion on the floor. So Councillor B. McGregor and Councillor Sakatchi, can I get you put this on the floor for discussion, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any questions comments on this? Looking at it, is there anything that materially we're missing? This is meant to be generally vague to say moving forward. Is there any other generalities? Like I'm going to refer to Councillor Doyle. What he said is that we can write a letter to both governments, federal and provincial, and say, please look at all ways you can assist in reducing costs to Canadians. And the carbon tax is one of them, but there's many other things, and I'm certain that that's what they'll be looking at, but more of a general letter as opposed to getting specific, because we can debate, there's 20 different things. Some of us would say you should cut that, and others would say no, you shouldn't, but just as a general letter coming from us is talking about the hard times, like using examples of what Councillor Wright just talked about, is that we're already experiencing, the 2 days in, hardships on farmers that are experiencing that. So we could do a general letter like that, or rather than try and get a specific, I don't want to get in the debate of which we should and shouldn't put in the letter on that. So, Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this is considering what we're facing, a very comprehensive motion and our resolution. So all I would perhaps add is something that is a little more high level and macro, basically stating that we want to make sure that our American neighbors respect our sovereignty. Something sort of fairly straightforward, just reinforcing the fact that this is essentially an existential threat to our country. The 51st state nonsense is not a joke, and I know none of us here think it's a joke. I know you have made that clear in your statements, that this is not something that we think is funny, despite sort of the rather blasé way it's been mentioned by the Trump administration. But would it be worth including something of that nature just to reinforce that position that we have?
And because this is really directed at administration, telling administration to do things. If there's something specifically we can tell administration do along that, I'd be more than encouraged to put in here. That's what this one is designed to say, administration continue doing all of these things. So if there's something that you had in mind that we'd ask administration to do on that. I give you some time to think about it if you'd like, or.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's a good question. I'm not quite sure how that fits, but I appreciate that direction.
Because I think we all agree with that. And that's the overarching of why are they really doing this? And it's certainly a major concern on every Canadian's mind.
Is there a different way of doing that? I don't want to hash it out on the floor necessarily, but maybe.
Yeah, maybe we can think, Bruce, do you have, are you inspired there?
I'm inspired, yeah. Sorry, I'm just thinking on out loud here, but I'm wondering if there's a way to work it into the preamble of the resolution to, where we say Canada's facing an unfair trade war based on tariffs, but something that kind of hits on that point. I'm just trying to think of, maybe you can think of the words as
That's
somewhere in there.
As we go into discussion, maybe we'll have somebody work on that and behind the scenes, the discussion, we put that up there.
That makes good sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Story. Councillor Hall?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Caniff. I know you mentioned it in your comments, I think, but I don't know if we need anything directly in there about, sharing this information, sharing this resolution that we have with all the different communities, all the different municipalities across Ontario, the different groups that you're a part of, the different groups that like Councillor Story and Councillor McGrail and everyone is a part of, like sharing it with the masses. I don't know if that needs to be included or if that's just going to happen.
But I like that, putting it in as a number to say, we will share this with municipalities across the country and solicit feedback if there's things that we should be doing along with the feedback, or one of them is we're looking for what other communities are doing. But if we share this, we can get comments back. So we can put specifically that in there as an action item.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Councillor Crew.
Well, that's what I was going to say, but no, that's okay. So I guess that goes without saying that this will be shared with AMO, Roma, FCM, everyone,
Yes.
to share our motion.
Ideally, we get the perfect document that all municipalities are saying, this is the same thing we should adopt.
Of course, it'll be perfect.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
course.
well, it'll be near perfect.
That's all.
Any other questions? Councillor Juvemil.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So, Councillor Doyle, his request, is it going to be part of this? Is there going to be something separate regarding a letter?
Yes, we can certainly put a letter in. If Councillor Doyle, if you're good with a more generic one, and we can reference, i.e.
Well, I would actually petition the federal government to almost demand them to enter into negotiations with the Trump administration rather than trying to enter into I haven't really seen any proof that the federal government has really tried to negotiate. So why aren't we almost demanding our federal government to try to enter into negotiations rather than try to go toe-to-toe and enter into a trade war? I don't know. I just think that part is being ignored. We're like, okay, let's fight them on the same turf, but I think why not also, I guess you could say that on one hand, but on the other hand, why not implore our federal government try to negotiate so that we can avoid a tariff war altogether? I mean, some may say you might not, but why aren't we at least attempting to enter into negotiations with the Trump administration?
Well, I expect, like even today when I read Trudeau spent 50 minutes talking to Trump, and they said it was rather heated discussions, because I think they ultimately are.
Okay, well, I would still feel comfortable if we still sent a letter just backing that up, that we encourage our federal government to still try to enter in negotiations to avoid a tariff war completely. I think because ultimately that's the best end result, to not have a tariff war. So I just think that's another angle that we should approach with.
Could we do Bruce's suggestion, put a whereas, that we
Sure.
would prefer to negotiate, we don't want this.
Right. Yes.
Negotiate, so if we could come up with something in the
Yeah,
whereas on that as well.
that would be great.
And
Thank you.
Sorry, And the mover and seconder, if you have any objections to anything that's being put up there, please just put up your hand. Or I'll go back to you and say, well, once we finish with all these, you can say, yeah, I'm good with them all, or. Okay, 7 and 8, now we'll get the two where, so there's 7 and 8, so the mover and seconder, that items 7 and 8 that we put in, are you good with that?
Yeah, those are fine.
Could you add in Border Mayor Alliance in there as well? Yeah. And then do you have the whereases up there as well?
Whereas don't form part of it, but we can put a paragraph.
So just,
put it in the letter.
so the two, that we prefer negotiating a piece, and then the other one is, sorry, the 51st state, yes, that we take that seriously in our sovereignty. If we have two general comments in there. Councillor Finn.
Oh, sorry. On number 7, can we take out the second that?
We will have constant feedback coming from administration and many other things to potentially deal with. Sorry? Councillor Doyle. Councillor Doyle, go ahead.
Sorry about that, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I couldn't get off mute. For number 7, I appreciate you adding that in. Can we add like possible, like the letter be sent for including potentially delaying or not increasing the carbon tax in April? Not saying they have to, but just I think that's a pretty big tax that we're about to tax our own Canadians on, and I think that's pretty hypocritical of ourselves to not even mention that when it's essentially going to raise our cost of goods.
I want to share a comment that Mr. Epp said the House is prorogued, therefore automatic carbon tax raise is automatic if House isn't sitting on April 1st. So if they don't get back to the government at hand, it's an automatic thing. But
yeah, which is another reason why we need to get an election called, so we can get our Parliament working again.
Councilor McGregor?
I would say related to adding that as an amendment, a specific carbon tax, capital gains tax, any tax we can talk about, wouldn't be a friendly amendment to this recommendation that was moved by myself and Councillor Sakachi. I like the way it is now, and I think getting specific like that, if we want to get ultra political on what taxes we like and what we don't, I think those are separate motions from this direction to staff.
So given that there 1 through 6 and 8 there doesn't seem any contention. What we'll do is we'll vote on item 7. If item 7 fails, then we'll come back to how it's worded. Does that make sense?
And if it's not going to be a friendly amendment, we can leave it the way it is, and then I can just do it if I want to. I can do a motion at another meeting. That's fine.
Okay. So are you good that we voted all together then?
Yep.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Doyle? Councillor Doyle, how do you vote?
Sorry. Yes. Yeah, good.
Thank you. All votes are in. Motion passes 14-0.
Thanks, everyone. With that, we'll move on to reading of the bylaws. The first and second, Councillor Wright, Councillor McGrail.
I'll move that. Thank you.
And I'll second.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Third and final, Councillor B. McGregor, Councillor Story.
So moved.
So seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. A resolution of council. Councillor Hall and Councillor Thompson, I need to wrap it up.
So moved.
Anyone opposed at 6:07? Perfect. The earliest we've ever gotten out. Thanks, everyone.